Welcome back to the International Commission podcast. We talk about mission stories, sharing the gospel with people from different backgrounds. We talk about what it's like to serve on mission full-time. And today, we're going to talk about not just doing ministry around the world, but we're going to bring it back home and talk about following Jesus in America.
In America.
Today, my co-host is Grace Barton.
Hello.
She's our marketing coordinator and does all the things.
All the things. All the many things.
And so today we just want to talk about what it's like to be Jesus followers here in the U.S. If you live in the U.S., you probably know what it's like. But we want to talk about just different aspects that might be challenges and advantages of being Christians here in the U.S. versus places overseas. The reality is that we do face a lot of challenges, I think, here that I wasn't aware of until I had more experience out in the world, and just realizing some things that are just kind of assumed that may be true or not true, or some things that we're just kind of blinded to until we've seen outside experiences and perspectives and things like that. So let's talk about that.
It's story time.
So starting off, Grace, let's just start at the ground level. The first thing that it means to follow Jesus is to put our trust and faith in him and be transformed by him. So what is your testimony? How did you meet Jesus?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian home going to church, and I accepted Christ when I was 5 years old. So I always knew who Jesus was. I always knew all the right things to do. But I don't think that it was really revealed to me, like, that I was truly, like, a sinner with struggles until probably, like, 2 years ago, which is not that long ago. But I think I just realized, like, oh, I'm not living this perfect life. Like, I think I had this picturesque, like, oh, if I go to church and if I do this and if I feel this way and I don't really do all these terrible things, but I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, sin is sin. And I was like, oh, I still mess up. So it was probably 2 years ago that the Lord really just revealed it to me. He was like, you don't need to be perfect, but you can be doing better. And I was like, oh, that's right. Because I'd grown up and still am very much a perfectionist. Like, I was like very hard on myself if I didn't do good enough. And I was like, the Lord must be the same way. If I'm not good enough, then he's not going to want me to draw near to him. But that is just the opposite of true. And like I said, 2 years ago, he really was like, are you really trying to please me or are you trying to please yourself? And I was like, wow, that's true. So I'd realized I was playing God kind of in my own life and that I was distancing myself from him so that I didn't feel guilty. But then I just ended up feeling more guilty and more ashamed. And I'm like, that's not what a relationship with the Lord is. We should be running to him even whenever we mess up. And so that's kind of my story. Nothing major, nothing crazy, but like, it's been a growing and learning experience from the start. But really 2 years ago, I would say the Lord just kind of was like, let's kick it into gear. Like, let's get serious about this. Like, it's not going to be easy, but that's okay. So. Awesome.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I grew up in a Christian home as well, and I'm really, really grateful for that. But that doesn't mean my faith is automatic.
Yeah.
When I was about 6 years old, I could tell you, all the major Bible stories. I could tell you who Jesus was, what he did, that he died and rose again to save us from our sins. But that knowledge wasn't faith. And I wouldn't have explained it like that at the time. I mean, I have those words now.
You'd say I know it. So.
Yeah. And so I just thought, oh yeah, I'm going to heaven because I believe that and because my family is Christian and I go to church and all this stuff. But that's when really the Holy Spirit started convicting me and showing me that, no, I have darkness in my heart. I'm disobedient, disrespectful, selfish, all these things. I mean, I was a little kid. I didn't have the opportunity even to like commit major crimes or do really bad stuff. But I knew that there was something missing. Something was keeping me from really being God's friend. And to me, that's how I understood the concept. I wasn't God's friend. He wanted a relationship with me. And also, I didn't want to go to hell. I mean, that terrified me.
I know.
But I knew that just because my parents were Christians, it didn't mean that I was. So I asked my dad about that.
Oh.
And he told me basically, yeah, this, God is showing you that you need to put your trust in him. You need to accept Christ, admit that you're a sinner, that you believe in Jesus and what the gospel says, and that you want him to rule your life. And so I did. My dad helped me pray. Very special times. Also awesome because we're about to go on a mission trip together.
Oh, that's
We've done
so
that before in the
cool.
past. It's been a while, so it's just always really
Growing
cool.
in faith together.
Yeah, and I'll be sharing that as part of my
people.
testimony,
Yeah.
and my dad will actually be there.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's always cool. But ever since then, I have been very enthusiastic about sharing Jesus with people. Many times I've been very awkward about it. Probably came on too strong about it too. But I was passionate about it. But kind of like what you were saying, there came a time really when I was later in high school and early in college where God showed me that I'd been performing.
Yes.
I've been trying to earn his favor.
By how good I can look or how good I can
sound.
And...
I lived at church. I was there all the time. And I genuinely enjoyed it. But also, I was trying to be the good kid. I was trying to please the Lord with my actions. And that's when I really started to understand the gospel of his mercy and his grace. And that really he gets all the credit, all the glory for saving us. And so with that understanding, that really launched me more into wanting to explore missions and just understand who I am in his kingdom. What's he created me to do by his design, by his power, and not just by what I thought I should do, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. And so in the US, I think it's kind of too easy for us to be able to float along like that and assume, oh yeah, I'm a Christian because I'm involved in Christian
and
culture.
Because I know this thing or I know that. And I agree.
And other places, I mean, I've met people that really endure actual persecution. Like their faith costs them a lot because they may be disowned by their families, or they may be threatened by the government or by people that live around them. They may lose their job. They may lose their credibility. They may lose their freedom or their lives, and still they choose to follow Christ and obey him. And so that's very, very humbling to me, but also realized, man, in the U.S. you can kind of pretend and play like you're a Christian or even think you are one.
Yeah. Without little to no, like nothing happens. It's just, you can believe what you want to believe and be who you want to be, and nobody's going to question you. So. And
I think that's maybe that's a disadvantage, actually. It's an advantage that we have the freedom, but it can be a disadvantage because you can just get to a point where you're an adult and realize, wow, I never really...
Well, you can almost make your own religion, like, oh, I believe what I want to believe, but I can pick the parts that I want to believe, too. And I'm like, Yeah,
that's dangerous.
Very.
Yeah, you're right about that. Of course, there's also other things that may be pluses or minuses. People debate them, like our churches are too big or too fancy or whatever. And people debate, back and forth whether those are good things or bad things and whatnot. But on a personal level, I can only tell you for certain what's right and wrong in my own life. So let's go there. So on a personal level, what are some challenges to your walk with Christ?
I think, just like I said, like I like to play God in my life, or I used to. I think sometimes I still can, but I think that that's what America preaches. Like I think they go around saying that you can be your own God, you can be in control of your own life, love yourself, do what makes you feel good. And that's just not what the gospel teaches at all. Like we're supposed to give up our comforts and give up things that make us feel good to please the Lord. But America says, you can do whatever you want as long as it makes you feel good, but you can also put this label on that you're a Christian, and you can change the rules, and you can change and nitpick and choose things. So I think that it's very hard growing up in that, is that everybody's just self-serving. Like, and it teaches that self-serving is a good thing, and that if you're really comfortable and loving yourself, then you're going to be a happy person and have a happy life, and it's everywhere. If you had more money, if you had more things, if you had more friends, like it's all materialistic things, and it's just very encouraged. So I think that's probably the biggest thing I've noticed, especially nowadays, is just that they don't care about anybody else. Like Americans tend to be very, like, we look inward, And we're like,
They were
as
very
long as
individual.
yes,
thinkers.
but we like to think that we care about other people. But if you disagree with us, then we don't like you, and we don't agree with you. And it's like, that's not how Christ calls us to live at all. But it's everywhere. It's in music, it's in movies, and I'm not saying you can't enjoy all of these things, but you have to be careful with what you choose to believe and take out of things around you. Because it's very easy to get caught up in that mindset of, well, as long as I'm happy, then, God must be happy too. And it's like, that's not how it works. That's not allowing him to be Lord over your life. That's you putting him in a box and allowing him to only work in certain areas.
I think those are really good observations. I agree. I have kids. We also work in student ministry at church, and something that I tell students a lot is that someone's going to disciple you and preach to you.
Yeah.
And if you're not getting most of that input from the Word of God, then you're going to hear it from culture. I mean, you're going to hear it from culture anyways. But what comes into your heart and sticks, you've got to use discernment and decide, and you've got to filter everything through the Word of God.
Yep.
And if you're not familiar with it, and you're not prayerful, listening to the Lord
not
daily, not seeking His wisdom, His character, you're gonna constantly hear that message that it is about you, and the chief ultimate good is your happiness and your feelings inside. And the thing about it is, it's not that God doesn't want to be happy, but the reality is the Bible paints a very different picture of our heart and our desires, because those without Christ or those not walking with the Spirit are very easily deceived.
Yep.
Our hearts are idol factories. Our hearts are full of all kinds of wickedness. We're led astray by our own desires. I mean, these are all things that Jesus said, that James said, and our hearts are desperately wicked.
Yep.
Who can understand it? And so, follow your heart is not maybe the all-encompassing mantra that maybe we should abide by.
No.
Because our hearts are pretty dumb. Like, our
hearts are deceitful.
Sinful
That's the whole
things.
Point. Yeah.
So it's definitely not the ultimate good just to listen to your heart. It's actually really dangerous.
Yeah.
Now, if your heart is transformed by Christ and we're transformed by the renewing of our minds, then the desires of our hearts are going to be more and more godly. And
but we have to be seeking that, or else it's very easy to fall out of it and be deceived.
And so that's the thing. Being someone who pays attention to culture, I mean, that's really part of our jobs is to pay attention to culture. Man, it gives us all the more responsibility, I think, to guard our hearts and minds and to be plugged into the Word of God every single day, because I'm getting all these other messages every single day. You know?
Everything, the world is pushing in every day, so we need to be seeking the Lord to push back.
And then there's just like the temptation of ease and comfort and wealth. It's all around us, especially here in North Texas. There's a lot of affluence, and I mean, I know some very strong Christian people that have a lot of wealth and do a very good job investing it in the kingdom and seeing themselves as stewards. But it is so easy not to do that. It's so easy to provide comfort for ourselves.
This is mine. I earned it, so I can do what I want.
And it's so easy to aspire to that. And so that's something we have to just guard ourselves from too, remembering that, hey, God provides what we need. And when we're seeking His kingdom first,
our needs will be met.
Everyone, and He gets to determine what we get to manage. You know?
Yeah.
So maybe on the other side of that, other difficulties besides just our personal devotion to the Lord and our mindset, what about persecution? Now, I'll say, on the outset, we think of persecution, and well, when I think about persecution, I'm thinking of some of those brothers I mentioned earlier that have been disowned, unemployed. Some of them have been jailed and beaten, or family members have been killed. That kind of persecution is what I first think of. And in the United States, I haven't experienced that extreme kind of persecution. Definitely maybe some discrimination.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that. I just wanted to put that in perspective, that when we're talking about persecution in the United States, I realize we're probably not
experiencing it the same as other people, but it's still present. I think that there's a lot of judgment and stereotypes around Christians, but I think that there's also been two different extremes. I think there's people who really hone in on the religion aspect of Christianity and people who really hone in on the relationship. And both are good things, but I think that people focus so much on one or the other that they can almost be off-putting to people who are non-believers. I mean, I've met Christians who are so pushy and so judgy that even myself as a believer, I'm like, I wouldn't want to talk to you on the side of the street, or I don't want to have conversations with you because you're just going to make me feel bad about myself. And I'm like, that's not the point of the gospel. But then I've met other people who are like, yes, I'm a Christian, but I can go out and do this, and I can say this or act this way, and Jesus will forgive me, it's fine. And so I think that there's just all these extremes, and so it's hard to say like, oh, I'm a Christian, because you don't want to come off a certain way. Like I tell people straight up, I've met people who are unbelievers, I'm like, oh, I'm a Christian, I believe this, so I believe it this way. But then I almost feel like I have to explain what I believe and that I love them and I want to talk to them anyway, because they immediately get this wall of, oh,
you're one of those.
Yeah, like I'm going to separate myself. So I think it's really important to act out your faith and live out your faith and to be bold in it, but not to be that overly pushy and not to be that, like, it's okay to be honest. But I think that America has just kind of transformed what being a Christian looks like, and that so whenever you say it, it's either this, oh yeah, me too, man, I'm a Christian too, or it's oh, I don't want anything to do with you because you're going to make me feel bad about myself.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, the biggest thing that I've noticed. And I'm not scared to tell people, but I am scared of their reaction and them not wanting to be close with me because they think that I'm going to be this super uptight, judgy person, when in reality, I'm like, no, like, I'm not perfect either. You know what?
Yeah.
I mess up every single day, but all they hear is, oh, you're this perfect little Christian who wants to fix me. And I'm like, that's not true.
I think that nailed it. People think, yeah, you're going to fix me. I'm going to be your project.
Yeah.
Do you really want to be my friend, or you just want to convert?
Exactly. So it's very different. It's discrimination in a totally different, and it's not like my life is being threatened. It's not like, oh, I could get fired. Like, you're allowed to believe what you want to believe. And I love that about America. But that's also, like we said, it's a double-edged sword where it's like, that's great, but it's also our biggest weakness because we have changed it to be about ourselves and to scare other people away. And that is not what the gospel is about at all.
Absolutely. You think about the kind of people that Jesus intentionally put himself around and hung out with.
He was around sinners.
Yeah.
All the time.
And they were transformed. And he wasn't around them just to be around them or just to affirm whatever they were doing.
No.
But to tell them, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Like, that's truth and love.
Yeah.
And he did show people acceptance and belonging as human beings.
Yes.
But he expected them to change by having listened to him and been with him and experienced his love.
Yeah.
And that's really what we want people that we encounter to experience as well. But there's this wall up a lot of times because of just this stigma or stereotypes, like you said, these stereotypes about Christians and what we're going to do or say or how they think we're going to make them feel.
Yeah. I think they see it as a lot of pressure. And I think that's like my testimony too. I saw it as, oh, I need to be good. I need to be good enough. And I'm like, there's nothing I can do to be good enough. I will never be good enough. That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah, that's exactly the point.
I've told so many people that, like, my whole life, like, there's nothing you can do to separate, like, God's love from you. There's nothing. But I'm like, I didn't believe that for myself. So how am I telling other people that when I don't even believe it internally? I'm like, I didn't believe I was good enough. And I was a Christian. Like, I accepted Christ when I was little. But up until 2 years ago, I was trying to be good enough. And I'm like, no, I'm still going to mess up. I'm still going to make bad decisions and bad choices. But Jesus loves me anyway. And so we need to be telling other people that instead of expecting, oh, you're a Christian, so instantly change and be better right now. And instantly you need to be a good person, because we're just not. Like, we're sinful people.
Yeah, that's a really good word. So I've been studying the book of Mark
Mm-hmm.
lately, and I've just been thinking about how quickly some of the disciples followed Jesus when he called them.
Yeah.
But man, it took them a long time to get it.
Yeah.
And it took them a long time to transform.
Yeah. It's not this overnight. Some people can get it overnight. Some people can, you know what? I understand and I want to go and I get it. But I think for me, I love growing up in a Christian home and I'm very thankful for it. But I think I was blinded to a lot of the real world, and it was just kind of like a routine. It was just this is what we do, this is why we do it. You know what? Like, I'm good. But it took the Lord being like, no, you're not good, and you're not perfect, and you won't be. You need me daily. Where I was like, wow, oh, I need to come to you daily and, realize I'm not perfect and ask for your guidance. And that's when I saw the most change in my life. And I've not gotten better. I've not been a better, quote unquote, person. But I felt more at peace because the Lord's been like, you know what? You finally realize, like, you can't be good enough. I am the one who saved you. You didn't do any of that. So.
Yeah. He gets all the glory,
yes.
all the credit. But yeah, I mean, he gives us his righteousness as a gift.
We don't earn it.
Yeah.
Which I've told people, but again, I didn't believe it, and I didn't realize I didn't believe it until it was just like, wow.
Yeah, I try to stress. I mean, I don't know if you can really communicate it to someone who doesn't know the Lord, but that good things in my life, Christ-like characteristics in my life, the desires that I have that are godly were given to me. Yes. They're results of being connected to the vine.
Yes.
Right? They're that's why they're called spiritual fruit.
Yep.
Fruit grows on.
It's not me by myself.
Yeah, it happens. And that's what Jesus says too, is, if you abide in me, you bear much fruit. And the fruits of the Spirit only come by walking with him, because he has to transform our hearts and minds.
Yes.
To expect someone to just have it all together, or to be, totally Christ-like. Yeah. Right when they convert, or ever at all. It's
unrealistic.
It's not biblical either.
No, and I think it's easy to see those people. Like, I know I've had people in my life where I'm like, oh, they're perfect. Like, well, I messed up. Like, they never did anything like that. And I'm like, that's comparison. Like, we cannot compare our walks with the Lord. Like, it's just, it's different. And we're all sinners. They may portray it as perfect, but we don't know.
Okay, that's what I was going to go to, is you don't know.
We don't know.
People have some secret struggle. I mean, there's someone in my life that we just learned something about. Mm-hmm. They've been struggling with something for a really long time. And it was a total shock.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I've had secret struggles. I think everybody does.
Yeah, you don't know. No. So whoever that kind of, perfect person is in your life, that I guarantee you there's something that they struggle with. And as you know the Lord more and closer and deeper, our hearts and our minds do change.
Yeah.
But we're people, and you just don't know what someone has struggled with in the past or is struggling with now. Unless
I don't like labeling people, because I know people labeled me. They're like, oh, your walk seems so good in like high school and early college. They're like, you just have it all together. And I was like, I don't feel like I have secret struggles and issues and things that I struggle with all the time. But like, I'm like, I'm not going to just dump this on people, but at the same time, they don't know. Like, yes, it looks like I have it all together. And so I'm like, I don't ever want to tell someone that, because they may be struggling. And like, I don't ever want them to feel like they can't be vulnerable and open up, because that just made me want to close up and go, well, I'm not perfect. I don't want to let you down. But again, it's not all about me. It's not all about me.
And some people who know you will know that you intentionally spend time with the Lord in the morning. Mm-hmm. And I do too. And I mean, really, the reason it's not because I'm like righteous and holy. Well, no. except for having received that from Christ. But it's not. It's because I need the Lord.
Yeah.
I need His truth. Mm-hmm. I need to hear from Him. I need to express my needs and feelings and praise to Him every day, because this world is hard. If you don't,
it's easy to get caught up in those worldly things.
Yeah. Like, and so I want to tell people that, they're like, oh wow, I wish I had a walk like you. I wish I could read the Bible and pray every day. It's just hard for me.
It's hard.
It's actually kind of a weakness. Like, I'm not. I do it because I need Him.
I need
right?
it. Yeah. Well, and I think you do have to get you do almost have to create a habit out of it, because our flesh will say, no, I don't need it. No, I don't want it. No, I don't have time for it. I know I had to like train myself.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to do this first thing, because if I don't do it first thing, I'm probably not going to do it at all.
Yep.
And I know,
and I'm going to tell myself, I'll catch up. And I have plenty of days like this. Actually, the day starts off just with action, especially with little kids.
Yeah.
Or something is out of routine. I'll catch up later in the day. Most times I don't.
No, and I've noticed on the days I struggle most are where I'm like, oh, I really did something I shouldn't have today, or oh, that slip up there. I'm like,
or just my attitude.
I didn't read my Bible today.
Yep.
Or I haven't read my Bible in 2 days. And I'm like, that's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
That is not a coincidence. Not saying you act better or do better when you read, but I do notice, like, my brain just, I don't know what it is, but the Lord really feeds into me, and that sets the tone for my heart and my attitude. It
sets the tone. Yeah, that's a great way to say that. It sets the tone. And when I've started the day meditating on the Word of God and spending time in prayer with Him, that's what I'm dwelling on, at least for the first little part of the day. Yeah. And it does set kind of the trajectory. And for me, it really helps my attitude.
Me too.
As well.
Yep. I know some people who can do it later in the day. I'm like, nope, I got to do it first thing when I get up. That's what I'm doing. So
what does that look like for you? What do you typically do?
For me, I get up and I started prayer journaling, and it's kind of a combination. It's not just a prayer, but it's not just a journal. I like combine. So I like to sit down and I'll just write a page or two about like, this is what's going on in my life right now. This is like some of the big updates. This is things going on. And then I will incorporate like things that I need prayer for, or I'm worried about, or I'm stressed about. So I'll write down how I'm feeling, and then I turn that into a prayer. Or, oh, I'm really excited for this coming up. Thank you for this opportunity. But it's more of a journal style. And so that's how I pray in the morning. I do that first thing. And then usually I will read either a couple verses or a chapter, and then just reflect on that and write down my like keynotes, things that stood out to me. And that's usually kind of my routine. But the prayer journaling is like my favorite part, because I'm like, I just express myself better through writing. I've always been that way. I don't speak my mind well, but I can sit down and I can meditate and I can write. And it's really cool. I get to look back like, oh, God answered this prayer in that way, and that prayer in that way, awesome. Like from years and years and years ago. So I've really only started that this past year, the real like intense prayer journaling. But usually it's that, and then reading my Bible and just reflecting. I like to sit in silence. This is something new I've done. I will sit in silence for like 10 minutes, like after my quiet time, because it's so easy just to go, all right, well, that's done. Like, let's move on and go on my phone or start working or start cleaning. But I'm like, I need to learn to just be at peace and at rest and just listening to what the Lord wants me and soaking it all in, because I don't like sitting in silence. I don't like having nothing to do, but I find that the Lord gives me a lot of peace if I choose to do that. But I don't often choose to, because I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. I like to always have something going on. But yeah, I've noticed sitting in silence just for a little bit and just meditating on what I've read or what I've presented to the Lord has really helped me. So
I think solitude and silence is one of those spiritual disciplines that is not common, or at least not for us in the West, in the first world, as it were. Because we're just busy, and we just have stimuli all the time, all day long.
So when we don't, it's scary. It's like I'm supposed to be doing something, or my brain needs activity, and so silence and not doing anything can be so overwhelming.
And I think it's super powerful for us because it's like a mini fast. Yeah, almost. I'm going fast from all of the stimuli and all of the attention and that busyness. Yep. And sit here and like this is a time for just me and the Lord.
No distractions.
And that is definition holy.
Yeah.
It is a set apart time for the Lord, and that's why you can experience such powerful personal touches from the Lord, and you can gain wisdom. My dad taught me a long time ago that a huge part of prayer is not just speaking to the Lord, but listening to him and just being silent and still. Yeah. Man, that's really uncomfortable for me to do, but I've learned to love it.
Yes. I've had to teach myself. At first I was like, I hate this. Like, I would put my phone on the other side of the room, but I can hear it going off. And I'm like, people need me. I want to respond.
Someone needs me.
Like someone's talking to me. But I'm like, if I just sit in silence, the Lord's going to speak to me.
Yeah.
And guess what? He usually always sends me something exactly what I need to hear. I mean, even this morning, I was feeling a little discouraged, and I was like, I just feel thrown off. And I had like a little Bible verse pop up on my phone right when I was feeling that, and it was like exactly what I needed to hear. And I just finished my quiet time, and I was like, Jesus, you are so good. Like, you knew I needed to hear that. Like, I just spent time with you, and here's your little reminder. Like, we just need to slow down. America's so go, 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 fast pace all the time. And so if you're sitting and being silent, it can be seen as lazy. Like, it's not lazy if you're choosing to gain wisdom from the Lord. In fact, that is
right.
Very productive.
Yeah. Well, there's actually a lot of action language in the Bible about pursuing wisdom.
Yes.
So you could just say that.
I'm reading Proverbs right now, and it's all wisdom. It's pursue wisdom, pursue this, pursue righteousness. And it's like, sit in his silence, reflect on his, meditate day and night. And I'm like, how are we supposed to do that when we're constantly being fed all these other things? Mm-hmm. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just sit and be still.
Yeah, it's crazy how the ambitious pursuit of something can be
just not sitting, not doing anything.
But for us it takes effort. I think in our culture especially, it takes effort.
It does. A lot of discipline.
So for me, I have a very technology assisted devotional habit, and I got no shame about that, really. I've got I am textbook ADHD, diagnosed when I was in second grade. Learned lots of different little tricks and tips and things to deal with it throughout my life, and I mean, it just so happens that that's part of my faith too. And that sounds kind of weird, but I have got to have reminders for like what I'm going to read, or even just reminders for, okay, it's time to sit and be still. So what I do, practically speaking, is I've really fallen in love with the YouVersion Bible app.
Oh, I know.
And not just because I can have the Bible anytime, anywhere.
Yeah.
But sometimes I can just listen to the Bible. Yeah. Sometimes I'll read it. Sometimes I'll do both. But what I really, really have liked is the reading plans.
Oh.
Because they just feed me, all right, here's what to read today.
Yep.
And then the guided scripture and the guided prayer modules.
I do like that.
Are there now.
I've tried that before. I do like that.
I'm a fan because while I do have all kinds of different like prayer strategies, like I like to use acts, adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication. Just the way my mind works, I can still get distracted. I'll think about one of those aspects and I'll just be off on that. And so I think the guided prayer thing, helps with structure. And you kind of click through it like Instagram stories, slides, and it'll give you a prompt for what to thank God for, some things to pray for, and then you go into my own prayer list. So I've got lots and lots and lots and lots of items on my prayer list. Especially working in ministry, I know lots of people who need lots of prayer for all sorts of different things, and every day we have prayer requests from our coworkers, and I've got people at church, and I've got my own family, and all of that. So I'll write all those down as prayer requests, and you can do that in the Bible app, and it will feed you just several of them each session.
Oh, okay.
So today I'm praying for this, and I'll just pray fervently for that, and I'm focusing on that one thing, because I can do that. I can hyper focus on this one thing, and I'll do that, and I'll just pray my heart out. Because I can just
remember every single thing and do
And if I just go through a list, it's overwhelming. There's so much. How do I choose what to pray for right now? So, anyways, the point
I'll
is,
have to try that. I like it.
Yeah, you can click through it and I'll pray for this right now. Okay, when I'm done with that, you just click over to the next one. No, I'll pray for these, and then I'll end up spending however much time I've got. It may be half an hour, maybe a whole hour.
Wow.
And what I really like to do, especially when the weather's good, is go on a prayer walk.
I like that. So I do that in worship walks. Those are my favorite.
And I've got a park by my house with a path, and I'll just go around and make circuits around until I'm done. And sometimes I'll stop by a park that's near our office and walk in the woods. For me, there's nothing like walking in the woods.
It's so peaceful, and you're like in His creation. So I'm like, I feel so close to the Lord when I'm like just out and
it's like I'm here for this. I'm here for
this purpose, for you.
Spending time with the Lord, and also being in motion helps me.
Me
because
too.
literally sitting still is still very difficult for me.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm still. I'm out. I'm in the woods. I'm praying to the Lord, and then I spend the rest of the time just walking and listening and observing nature and what does God have to say.
Yep. I do that too. It's my favorite.
So, yeah, I have a very aided discipline. So I've got lists, to-do lists, prioritize lists with dates and all of that stuff.
Reminders.
But it so happens I just have to do that with my spiritual life too. So if that's you, if your struggle is
then that's okay.
that you want to spend time with God every day, but just you're not organized enough. You're not sure where to start or what exactly to do. Or when we're saying spend time in prayer, you're like, okay, I have some prayer requests, but after I pray for those things I need, what do I do?
Yep.
Maybe something like this would help you. There's also an app called Dwell, I think a lot of people love, and it's a guided prayer and scripture thing. But yeah, if you've got to use an app to help you, no shame in that.
No. Everybody's walk is different. Everybody needs different things. But as long as you're having that time with the Lord, then I don't really think it matters how you go about it.
Yeah.
And what's happening.
It's got to be sincere. It's got to fit you.
Yes. Don't do what everybody else is doing just because it's the cooler aesthetic thing to do with my Bible quiet time with all my highlight. You don't have to be that person. I
love that. I love seeing that. It inspires me. And when my friends have, their Bible, I'm gonna call you out, Rafaela. I love watching your walk with the Lord.
Her Instagram stories
she doodles just beautiful art in her notes to the Lord and writing out scriptures and prayers and praise to the Lord, and her Bible is all highlighted and sketched. I love it. That is not me at all.
See, which that is me, which is so funny. Me and my boyfriend, totally different. I am like highlighting and I'm writing things down. His Bible doesn't have like almost anything written in it. If it is, it's like in the margins and it's neat. And I'm like writing all over the page and there's things inserted in all the pages, but it's just different. Yeah. And it's not bad. It's just people do it differently. It's different.
So that's the thing. Again, maybe that ties back to what we were saying at first.
Yeah.
There's not a supposed to. There's not
a right
this,
or a wrong.
here's what you need to aspire to be a Christian. Like
no.
if I was not a believer, or if I was not, a strong believer, and I looked at Grace or Hafa's Instagram and thought, I can't do that. So maybe I just can't be as good a Christian. That's dumb. Like that's not true.
No, it's just their individual relationship. But it's very easy to look and compare and go, oh, I could never. So why would I even try?
It's like, it's too much. For me, it's like that with prayer. I've just got so much to pray for. And the fact is, there's a whole Bible every day. Like, what should I read right now?
If I sit down, I'm going to get too overwhelmed. So why even try?
Take it in little chunks and bits. Yeah. All right. So we could probably just keep on with that topic forever. But we have other things to talk about. Some of the pressures just living up to whatever ideal. Some of it is just other things that we struggle with, like temptations. Well, we face those head on with the scripture that is being fed into our souls and listening to the Lord. Because the reality is when you're a Christian, maybe especially when you're really following the Lord, you're going to be hit with lots of temptation all the time because the devil wants to take you down.
And specific to what you struggle with. I notice that all the time. I'm like, why are all these things coming at me and somebody else doesn't affect? And I'm
bother him,
because guess what? That's what I struggle with. And Satan's going to be like feeding and feeding and feeding until guess what? One day you're going to pick it up and then go, man, like that's exactly what he wanted to happen.
Like if you struggle with like lust, you're probably just going to see lots of things that will tempt you.
Yes.
If you struggle,
that has been me.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, it's like unavoidable.
It's everywhere. And guess
what?
It's
not unavoidable. It's very difficult.
If you're not feeding your mind with the gospel, then your mind's only going to go, oh, then this is okay. Like it's okay. Like, but then if you're not combating that with the gospel and with the truth, the lies will start to kind of bleed in with the truth, and that can get to be very, very messy.
Yeah, especially when it's reinforced over and over.
Yes, well, sometimes you can't avoid it, right? Sometimes you're watching something, or sometimes something pops up. Like you cannot avoid everything, and like sometimes that is just you have to choose. You have to make the decision, and I think that's as Christians one of the hardest things it's going to be in our face. It's going to be there all the time. But we get to choose what we do with that.
Yeah, we take every thought captive and submit it to Christ. Right?
Yes, we can choose to act on our thoughts, or we can and lies, or we can choose to act on the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And those things can very easily get muddled and messed up. And I know I've been there. I'm like, oh, well, I thought this was fine, or I'd be fine. But then I'm like, oh, I'm not strong enough. I cannot do this on my own.
Sometimes you've got to cut off that hand that offends you, right?
But I think I
can't go.
And
I'm
like,
not going there.
what are you thinking? You are not strong. You cannot do this without Christ. But that's what America specifically is feeding is you are strong enough. You are capable enough.
That is so
you
true.
Can do it.
Look within yourself. You have the strength within. And I was like,
yes.
If they're the problem, how can you be the solution? That doesn't really make sense.
And I still have to tell myself each day, I'm like, it's not me. Because I'll have days where I'm like, I did really good today. Like, I didn't struggle. I did so good. I'm like, that is such a sinful way of thinking. Like, I did not do so good. The Lord gracefully gave me strength to stay on my path with Him. Jesus worked through me to make good decisions. But I did not do that. So
your struggle might be something else, like just like trust, like worry, anxiety. If you worry about financial things, guess what's going to probably happen to you a lot? Everything's going to break all the time.
I've been there.
I've had to. I would say I think my trust in the Lord as a provider has gotten stronger through exercise because just.
You have to
all the time.
I think specifically with being in ministry, we really have to rely on the Lord will provide because it's not in our hands and it's never a set thing.
Yep.
And so it's just like, well, the car broke and I have this payment and I have this to do. I don't know if it's going to get paid, but you know what? I'm going to trust and I'm going to do what the Lord's asked me to do.
I know that I'm doing it to the best of my ability, what the Lord has called me to, and the responsibility is really not mine.
No, I can do what I'm called to do. I can do my position. I can do everything I'm supposed to do, but I don't have control over that. And that's sitting and trusting because everything in me is going, I can do this side hustle and I can do this and I can go and pursue that. And it's like,
oh man, me too.
It's like, no, it's like just because you can does not mean you should.
I just had one of those conversations with my wife yesterday. Like someone we know started driving for Lyft. And it's actually doing really well. And I was like, well, there's an idea. No. Yeah. It's not wrong to do that, but God has called me not to do side gigs. Well, I do sometimes, but it's like just one-off actively and to help someone.
Yes.
But just to, I've just got to buffer our budget a little bit.
It's out of worry. It's the heart thing.
Yeah,
it's
if
like,
it's out of worry.
If it's, I could use some extra money. This opportunity came up. Why not do it?
Fine,
but I'm really worried. I'm not going to make my payments. I need to do this. I need to do that.
Do the side hustle because I'm not sure God's going to come through.
A sinful way of looking.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to get caught up in that, especially nowadays, because people just flaunt what they have and flaunt the money and I'm fine and
there's always some opportunity to make quick, easy passive income, right?
Yes.
There's always some pitch to make some it's like, you know what, if you are good at that and you can do that and it is not, if you're not replacing some trust with God
with that, then good
and
for
putting
you.
it at, then go for it, whatever.
For it.
And again, like there's no cookie cutter way to
No.
follow Christ in America. You just, it's really between you and the Lord, but also
not making it too personal about yourself.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like we're saying, it's all about you. It's definitely not.
No, but you do have to make your relationship your own.
Accountability.
Yes.
We need to, following Jesus is not a solo sport.
No.
But your faith is your faith, and between you and God, He knows your heart. You know your heart, or maybe you don't. You need help. You need Him to show you your heart. But we need people around us that also will tell us sometimes when we're like, "Hey, are you doing these side gigs because you enjoy it? Or are you doing it because you're afraid?"
Yeah.
Uh-oh. You need somebody to ask you those things.
Out.
Yeah.
Yep.
When it comes to making disciples, sharing the gospel with people, and then especially when we invite them to follow Christ and they do, helping them walk through their faith, do you think that's different here in the U.S. than in other countries?
I think so. I think it is much harder, first of all, to even share your faith. Like we said, people are so quick to judge. But I think also that people are so closed off, or they think, I'm going to say it, Americans think that we're know-it-alls. If we've heard about it, it's like, we know who Jesus is, so I don't want to hear from you. So they don't even open it up. Whereas I've noticed in other countries, people are like, yeah, I know about Jesus, but I'm willing to listen to you. Like, I'm willing to hear. I think Americans are so stuck in their ways that they're just like, no, I know enough. Like, I know what I need to know. And it's really, really hard to get people just to sit down and listen to you. Like, even people in other countries are so quick to smile and wave or say hello or be hospitable. Americans are, again, just, I'm focused on myself. I'm not going to look at anybody else. I'm not going to trust anybody else. So it's really hard to start those conversations, let alone just begin to even open up with them and ask them to listen about Christianity, because then they're probably going to be afraid of what you're going to say. So I think it is different. I think that there's a way to do it and a way not to do it. I mean, I see so many people, standing on the street corners yelling, you're going to go to hell, you're going to go to hell. And I'm like, that's not the way to win people to Jesus. I know some people who think that's great and they're like, oh yes, we need this. But even myself as a Christian, I'm like, you're scaring me. I don't want to be scared into, like, yes, we all need a healthy fear and respect. But I'm like, we need to teach that the Lord is love and that we can't be perfect. But there's so many things in culture screaming that, oh, you struggle? Well, you're going to go to hell then. So you can't be saved. And I think that people just get that in their brain, that if you're a Christian, you want to talk to me, you're just going to tell me what about person I am and what's wrong and how I need to change. And I don't want to do that. So I think it's very different. Whereas I think people in other cultures are very open and receptive and maybe don't even have all the resources we have. I think that we have too much distracting us here to where we're content. A lot of people in third world countries don't have a lot and they struggle and they have more day-to-day struggles in their lives. They need something to believe in. I think Americans are very used to being comfortable.
And we believe in us.
Yeah, we're comfortable all the time and we have what we need. So man can give us that. So why do we need God in our lives? So I think it's a lot more difficult to break that barrier.
I feel like one advantage of living in America that actually turns into a spiritual disadvantage maybe is like there's always a safety net.
There is.
Now, I'm not saying people don't really, really struggle, and I'm not saying that you can't hit rock bottom.
There's a lot of resources
you definitely
for
can.
people.
But like, don't hear me wrong, but like our poorest have gotten more opportunities than poor people in most of the rest of the world. Like if you don't make money today, your family will not eat. Yep. Look, in America, you can find some way.
You can find some way to get food.
And it's not that it isn't difficult. It's just like we have a lot of reasons to trust in ourselves and in our community and our country and human effort, that is
there's
just
not a need for God.
Yeah.
Like in their opinion, it's just, well, we have what we need. So, or I have a relatively good life. So I don't really need him right now. And it's like, we need him all the time.
All the time. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. If people who are, in my experience anyways, people who are familiar with need and brokenness and hurt are so much more open to hear and receive the gospel.
Yes.
Yep. In general.
And it's just harder to find those people in America because a lot of people are just blessed and they have what they need and they have good jobs, they make good money, they have a nice, good family life. So it's like, why would I don't really struggle. So.
Okay, so I ask teenagers in the U.S., what prayer requests they have. They have a test, they have a sports game, something like that. Ask kids in Nepal what they need prayer for, Christian kids, and they're like, there's persecution. Like, my parents don't accept me. I don't know what to wear. Because if I wear these other clothes and not my traditional Hindu clothes, my parents are... And so that's just a totally different world.
Yeah. No, I have this test coming up here, kids. Like, it's just...
And that's good. I think you should lift everything to the Lord.
But it's just so different. Yeah. Like, it's life and death prayer requests for these people. And for us, it's just more emotional, which they're all good, but it's so different. Like, I've had people prayer requests, like, I don't know where my next meal is coming from.
Yeah. It's just kind of like the depth of need that people are familiar with.
Yes,
it's just
and Americans
very
don't have that depth of need. Yeah. Like, we just don't, because everything's so easily accessible. So it's hard.
And it's kind of like, too, we have it's such a blessing that we have so many Christian resources like
Yes.
books and I mean the
Freedom
Bible
to
app,
go to church and
all
worship
this stuff.
and
If people want to be Christian, they just will. And if they don't, they're not about it.
Nope.
You know, and I think that's the mentality for so many people. Like, yeah, I could go to church if I was interested in that, but I'm fine.
So I don't really need it.
Or they think they're fine.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't really need it. But there's so many things at play there, so many layers. One is just you have the wrong perception of what church is. You have the wrong perception of what Christianity is.
Yes.
I'm not doing it for fun. I'm doing it because it's true.
And I think a lot of
real.
churches make it look like fun these days. And that's where the power of the mega churches come in.
Yeah.
Is it's, how are worship making you feel? Worship is supposed to be between you and the Lord, not the room you were in, not the lights, not the music, not the sound. Like, and that's what people think. They think, it's just showy. So, you know what? Like,
yeah,
it's a concert.
There's a phrase that goes around. I don't know who coined it. I hear it a lot. It's like what brings people in the door is how you have to keep them.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's entertainment, and then you get down to trying to disciple people and how to read and obey God's word, that's optional in their minds.
Yes.
You know, I can come to this service and enjoy this event or enjoy this worship service. Yeah, and I'm hearing the word of God. Like somebody's preaching, and a lot of times mega churches have really good Bible teachers.
Yeah.
And so people feel like, oh yeah, I got my thing, and now I'll go through my week and decide what of that to apply to my life and what not to.
Yeah.
And okay, discipleship is so much more than that. We're walking together. We're teaching one another how to obey Jesus Christ, because that's what he said a disciple is someone who knows and obeys his commands, and that's really hard to do on our own. You know,
it is. Well, and it's nothing against mega churches. I went to a very large church growing up, but
I
did it.
I think my church is pretty big,
but I think they did it right. Like, they had worship and it was really good. We had full orchestra and choir, but it was focused on the individual. And you could worship however you want. We had people who liked to raise their hands, people who didn't, people who, you could do what you want. But I've been to other churches where it's this really loud and showy, and they're like, everybody raise your hands. And I'm like, I don't, like, that's not personal. That's a show. That's an
experience.
This is how I'm feeling, so you're going to feel the same way too. And it's an experience. And that's what I don't like. I'm like, we should be able to worship and express however we want, whether that's silently, whether that's praising with our hands up, whether that's sitting and praying. Like, I think it is all very showy, and you have to be very, very careful. Is your church being showy, or are you actually being worshipful? And you just have to use.
Yeah, there's also like that's another another topic of its own is, and we want to pursue excellence.
Yes,
like in worship,
but
and someone who has a mind for production.
You want it to be good.
You've got to approach that with discernment and wisdom. Am I trying to put on a show, or are we trying to just make this as excellent for the Lord as we can?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's its own whole thing.
That's a whole
so
separate.
When we're talking about people with different backgrounds and religions, obviously, if you go to a Muslim country, you're gonna meet a lot of Muslim people, and they're gonna have a common background, or Hindus or Buddhists. Or Catholics, for that matter, especially throughout Latin America and parts of Europe, Orthodox, here in the U.S., we do kind of assume, like I was saying a minute ago, if people are interested in Christianity, they'll do it, and if they're not, they're not, and everyone else is just kind of whatever. Mm-hmm. But what do you think? I mean, do you think it's as common to encounter people from other world religions, or what are, quote unquote, what are most people?
Yeah. I think from my experience, from just meeting people or seeing online, people would say they're Christians. People would say America is largely Christian. But you can see from their actions that that's not true. It's the self-serving. But I mean, I've seen a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, no, I believe in God, but I'm going to go support this, or I'm going to act this way. And it's like, you've not read the Bible. You're just saying you believe in God, which is totally different than being a Christian. Mm-hmm. So I would say you see a lot of people who say they're Christians, but I would say they don't know what they believe. It's just a label at this point.
Okay, so if you're
religion.
not Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or Jewish, you're Christian because you're American.
Or atheist. Those are the two I've seen. The
Yeah, and
biggest one.
otherwise
Or
it's just not a big. Either
yes,
way,
or
otherwise
satanic.
it's not
I've
a big
seen
deal,
a lot
right?
of people, like, satanic thing is becoming a big thing.
That's true.
And that's
witchcraft
everywhere.
is really on the rise.
I have seen
yeah.
that everywhere, and you have to be careful because it disguises itself as other things. But I have seen that on the rise, like, especially with people my age, and I'm like, that's scary.
Crazy. Yeah,
it's scary. But and like very openly are like praising the devil. I'm like, no, like that's
yeah. And a lot of what I've seen. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you're good.
A lot of what I've seen from people who say that they are satanic or Satan worshipers is less, well, in their minds anyway. They explain it this way. It's less, oh yeah, we're worshiping this personified evil being.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about ourselves and our desires and like being the most fulfilled person. And they'll tell you straight up, my wants and desires are the most important thing. And that's satanic. Yeah. Guess what? It is satanic.
And guess what? It is. And guess what? That's exactly what we've been talking about. Christians are doing the exact same thing.
And there's a real Satan. That is a dangerous game.
Yeah. So I would say that Christianity would be considered America's religion.
Kind of the norm
but
thing.
I don't know how many people truly have Christ in their hearts and actually live it out. I think that percentage is very small. So
you can talk to people. Say your average American person walk up to on the street, or maybe you don't walk up to on the street. They're in your life somehow. You build a relationship with them, and I agree. I think that's going to be the most common thing they might say. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I believe in God. I love God. I don't really go to church, or I do. I go to church,
did, but I had a bad experience.
And you really got to dig into that and say. Yes. Yeah, or I have had a bad experience. That's a good point.
I've had a bad church experience. Yeah. I hear that all the time.
And in any of those scenarios, you really got to dig in and just explain, like, share your testimony. Like, what does it mean to you to follow Jesus? Who is he to you? Why do you spend time every day with him and have a bad day when you don't? I mean, all these things we're talking about, it's got to be personalized because, one, I mean, it's true. We can't assume anything about what other people know or don't know or believe or don't believe. They also can't assume that about you. You got to tell them. You need to tell people in your life what it means to follow Jesus and what difference he makes in your life, because that's really what they're going to be interested in anyways. You're going to gain a hearing by telling them this is real. This is not just
it's
a
not
ritual. It's not something added on. Like, this is my life and here's why.
Well, and making it a point that they need to ask Jesus to be Lord of their lives. I've had a lot of conversations with people who are like, I went to church growing up and like, I want to read my Bible again. Like, how do I feel closer to God? And I always start it and I say, have you accepted him in your heart? Because they're like, I pray and I don't hear anything. And I'm like, you have to open that bridge of that connection. That is on you. Like, God can only reach out so much. You have to want it and you have to give something up, and that is dying to yourself. And so I will ask people, I'm like, well, have you asked him in your heart? Like, it may be a simple question. A lot of Christians would be like, oh yeah, all my friends would be like, yeah, when I was little. But there's a lot of people who go, no, like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, but they believe in God. They have they would say they have a relationship. They do all the right things and not for showy reasons, but they don't have that connection, so they feel disconnected, so they leave because they weren't taught you need to ask him into your heart. Like, that is a very, very important step that I think gets left out. And so I've noticed that.
So well said, Grace. I have heard so many people say, yeah, I want to be closer to God. I want to read the Bible. I want to pray. But I just feel like I'm talking to a wall. That exact thing. I've heard from so many people in the U.S.
That can be a thing if you don't have that personal relationship because you're not friends with God yet. You're not. He's not your heavenly Father.
That's what I dealt with when I was a little kid. Like, even I'm not friends with God.
You can know all the right things and you can do all the right things, but if you don't choose to give up and to ask him to be in control, then you're still in control of your own life. Yeah. And that's not going to get you anywhere.
There's some scary things in scripture, like about at the judgment. Mm-hmm. Jesus is, there will be many who come and say, Lord, Lord, we did this, we did that in your name. And he's going to say, depart from me. I never knew you. Yep. And oh boy, that should be a warning.
Yeah. Because I know a lot of people who would say, I love Jesus. I spend time with him every day and I do this. I'm like, but are you really? Like, You
Like,
don't.
have you died to yourself and
Yes.
been made alive in Christ, through Christ, for Christ? Have you
Yep.
taken up your cross?
Yep. Do you die
Because,
daily to yourself, or do you
yeah.
just go, yeah, I see Jesus and he talks to
Mhm.
me, or are you just using scripture to validate what you believe about your own life and what you want to believe? Because
We
I've
just
seen a lot of people who do that.
got to be really clear about what it means to follow Jesus. Galatians 2:20, I've really settled on that because I feel like it just communicates what the Christian life is and what the gospel means. That
Yep.
I have been crucified with Christ and I no longer live.
Yep. It's not me.
But the life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. That's the whole point. Like, that's why I live. And that's so much more than just, I like God. I think Jesus has good things to say, and I'm gonna think about that and maybe apply some of that to my life. No, that's a totally different thing.
That's nitpicking.
Besides
and that's
being
nitpicking.
your life.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but that same approach also works well when you do run into someone who grew up in another religion, and here in a major metroplex like Dallas Fort Worth area, there are people from all over the world.
Internationals.
I grew up in Denton. Actually,
in Denton, I grew up with a lot of internationals.
Yeah, and there's
all
a
the time.
lot of people from India there, and you run into Hindus, and their worldview is very different. But I've met a lot of people from India that they were culturally Hindu. And kind of like the same thing with our American Christians.
They think they believe it, and they think they're
Hindus that grew up Hindu, and it's like, oh, this is just how it is. But they don't have much of a personal faith. Nope. Of course, Hindu is different. It's not really, Anyway, all that aside, that's a complicated topic that we definitely have resources on. Go and find how to understand Hinduism and share the gospel with Hindus. Check out our E&E trainings with Ali Carr.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have several friends. I mean, we have friends who are from Pakistan, and they're like, yeah, we grew up, like, we'd say we're Muslim, but, like, we don't really do anything, but, like, we identify as Muslim.
Yeah.
But they think also that they believe the same thing we do. They're like, yeah, we believe in Jesus. We believe... And they have really great conversations. They're very open, but it's that dangerous because they think it's the exact same thing, just a different label.
The openness is not real openness. But you know what? There is common ground.
Yes.
And that's an advantage. I think a lot of people are intimidated by sharing the gospel with Muslims because, oh man, they're like the other.
Yes.
It's like, you need to understand there's a lot of common ground to work from. With Muslims, and they don't know who Jesus is, and they don't actually know what the Quran says about him. No,
because again, they're like us.
It's a cultural thing.
People who live as Christians but don't actually know. They live as Muslims, but they don't really know. And sometimes that's good. It leaves them open. And we have been told, like, our family's been told, like, oh, you guys are so different. Like, you're so... And I'm like, we can't change it. We've known them for so long. But, like, sometimes it's just those small seeds that we'll plant over time. And again, you can't force on anybody. Like, the Lord will lead them when it's their time.
Absolutely. On the positive side. More positive side.
The bright side of things.
I've been to a lot of countries in the world. All right. And I've lived in some other ones too. And I'm here to tell you, this is a really good one.
Yeah.
Traveling the world. Dude, there's things that I really love about Asia. Just the culture, the food, the family, and Latin America, the same thing. Yeah. Just the love for life and the emphasis on community, the hospitality in the Arab world. I just really love the efficiency and sustainability in Europe.
Yeah.
I love. You need to be honest that we've got some problems in our history and in our nation. Like we've got some problems, and division is one of those. It is just deep.
Yeah.
There's a lot of justice problems. We got some bad stuff going on. But I feel like it's become trendy kind of on the other side to just knock on America. And here's the thing, guys. I think we should be honest about the negatives.
Yeah.
But this is a great country.
Yep,
y'all.
it is.
And so let's talk about, and especially for Christians.
It is.
So we've talked about some of the things that make it hard to follow Jesus and make disciples here. But really, what are some of the advantages? What are some of the good things about America? And specifically, what are some of the good things about being a Christian here?
Well, first of all, there there's just freedom. There's religious freedom, which most countries don't have. We can choose to believe whatever we want to believe, and we don't have to live in fear about it. We may get judged for it, but it doesn't matter. Like, we can be whoever we want to be, we can believe what we want to believe, and that's okay. I think there's also a lot of resources for us here that countries don't have. I think we get a lot of really awesome opportunities there's a lot of Christian movies and music and influence, and if we choose to look for it, it's there. I think in a lot of other places, you have to really, really search, or they're non-existent. And it's like that community and that, outlook on life is very hard to find. Like, it's very accessible to us. So yeah, I think the accessibility is like the number one thing that's like such a blessing. Like, we do have so much, and it's not, you can drive down the road and there's a church, and
there's
like
three
everywhere.
of them.
3 of them.
Yeah.
There's churches everywhere, but you have to make the choice to go. But
it's there.
Not, it's there. It is not a hard thing to have access to, which for a lot of people in other countries, it's very difficult to even find that. So yeah, I think America is very blessed just resourcefully. We have a lot of resources, especially for Christians. And I mean, I've just seen a lot of people, like even a lot of celebrities who are turning to the Lord. They have everything. But there are people with a lot of influence. And I think that's really important too. People with high influence and high follower counts, who they have everything, but they still feel empty. And so they're turning to the Lord. And so their fans get to see that. And so there's a lot of influence, and you have to be careful with how you use it, I think. But we do have those resources, and it's available.
I have not thought about celebrity as a resource like that. That's a really good perspective.
I've seen a lot of people. I have like YouTubers growing up, and like they've turned to the Lord. And guess what? They make little content and little videos about Jesus changed my life and Jesus did this. And people still love them and watch their videos, but they've changed. And it's not a huge change, but you can see it. And you can see like they're so happy. They're so content. And I've seen a lot of celebrities who are like, yep, I'm a Christian. I've become a Christian.
I'm thinking about Russell Brand right now as you talk about that. That's a surprising one.
Yeah.
But one thing I know about him is, like, I've never followed him too closely. I've laughed at a lot of things that he's had before that I shouldn't have before he was saved, because he is a very funny, very clever man. But it's his cleverness that I do admire. Yes. That he's a very thoughtful person. He always has been. He's a comedian, but he's a philosopher, and he always has been. So for him to have turned to Christ, that's so huge, because people know that he's a thinking person, and he's not just following some trend, and he hasn't lost his mind.
No.
He's got reason for his faith, and it is radical now. So that kind of influence is such a treasure, such a valued thing.
It is, and you have to be wise with it. But I've seen a lot of people who I like grew up watching on YouTube or grew up watching movies, and their content has just changed. Like, they used to be like, this terrible thing happened in my life, so here's a story time and this, and I'm so upset, but now they're like, yeah, these things did happen, but guess what? I'm doing so much better now, and Jesus loves me. And they're still using their influence, and they still make the same style of videos, they still do their thing, but just the total feel of it is different. And it's like, people love them. They're like, I love to see you so happy. I love to see that you're doing so well. And it's like, little do they know, it's because of Jesus.
That's a great influence too.
Yeah. I've just seen it more and more these days. And it's like, you can never tell. Like, of course you see these paparazzi photos of big celebrities doing this and that. But like, just to even see that is a big deal. I mean, there was some video the other day, and it was Justin Bieber and Shawn Mendes, and they were sitting in church together, and they were just like, it wasn't them singing, it wasn't them the spotlight, they were just present. Like, just even your presence, like choosing to be there, whether you know their personal relationship or not, is a big deal, because they have large followings of people who are like, oh, if they're gonna go to church, maybe I will. Like, maybe if they're going.
Yeah. I would say Bieber is another example of someone who is such a realistic witness of what it's like to follow Christ. Like, I mean, it's like, as a Christian, I'm like, oh, I wish you wouldn't do this, or I wish you wouldn't say that.
But he's very real.
Like, well, why? I'm not, my reputation as a Christian, Jesus' reputation isn't on the line because of how he acts. Sanctification's a process,
is public,
man.
Too, which is the thing.
Yeah.
All of his life is public. Ours isn't.
What reputation would you give Christianity if every moment of your life was on the internet?
What is our reputation, though? That's the thing.
You've put me in my place. That's a good point.
But it is so true, because, I mean, guess what? He does, but people are like, oh, he's not a Christian because he acts this way, or he cusses. I'm like, Who hasn't every once in a while?
but
I'm
also,
sorry,
like,
but it's not
he's been
on
steeped
blast.
in that culture. Listen, I don't know if you ever been on the inside of the entertainment world, but it's real rough, folks. Okay,
It's very easy to look as a Christian and be like, oh, I'm judging him for his personal relationship. Maybe that's not how I would do it. Maybe it's not perfect, but guess what? He has a
and
relationship
like
with
I
the
believe
Lord.
he's following Christ, and he will be sanctified. Like some of that stuff may eventually he may be convicted of.
Yeah.
But
But those are his personal struggles. Those are his personal things. And it's very easy to look at it and go, well, I don't struggle with that. He does. But then it's also the same thing. Like we said, his relationship with the Lord is on full blast. Like, we don't know it.
Is.
But, like, everything, his whole life, everything is so public. I'm like, people probably wouldn't agree with everything I do either.
No, people,
you know what?
and people are always complaining about some imperfection in some celebrity's life. And like, first of all, you don't really know that person.
No.
But also,
we can't
salvation happens like this. Sanctification takes time. It's a process.
And we can't judge by his actions or his, like, oh, you're really a believer or oh, you're not. That is between him and the Lord. But right now, he's choosing his platform to be like, I am a Christian.
Yeah.
But like you said, he's a very realistic, which I think we need more of those. I think there's a lot of the really perfect and good-looking Christians.
Oh.
There's not a lot of people who I think are very relatable. I think we need people who are relatable and who are visually like, oh, they struggle.
And you see change over time in their lives too.
Yes.
Like, I mean, you could look back and see it, and that's a very realistic picture of what following Jesus is.
Yeah, and I think I have grown more allowing myself to be imperfect than whenever I was doing that perfect. Like, I think that when I've allowed myself to just be imperfect and to be like, oh, I need the Lord, I think I felt more secure.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm like putting on this show and I'm like, like, I was more sinful when I was being perfect than I was when I was being sinful, which doesn't make any sense, but it does. It's recognizing the need for Savior.
Well, again, are you trusting yourself or are you trusting Jesus? Are you trusting your actions or his finished work? You know?
I've not gotten any better. I've not gotten any worse. But I think that allowing myself to be imperfect has grown me closer to the Lord than always trying to live up. Because I wasn't perfect even when I thought I was being it. So, yeah, it's really cool to see people being relatable. And I think people need that. Because there's a lot of people who struggle. And you're like, I can't be perfect. You don't need to be. You can still struggle with things and be a Christian. Mm-hmm. You are going to still struggle with things. And that doesn't go away. It may get easier, but it may take time. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And I think that's a powerful part of our testimonies, especially someone who knows us and is in our life. Is one, they're going to see transformation.
Yeah.
But also just being honest that, I struggle with these things. Mm-hmm. But here's how Jesus is making a difference in my life and giving me hope. Is encouraging, mutually encouraging. And it's a great testament to Jesus' power. So you said something about the examples. Sometimes having a flawed example that is following Christ and we see positive transformation is better than even some of our well-known pastors, unfortunately, because something that's going on here just in our area in the Metroplex is there's been like 5 or 6 like well-known pastors that have fallen into sin, or have been caught, or it's caught up to them.
Yep.
And like that's the example that people think of when they think of a Christian as someone who
they're the pastor of this church
has their life together.
Yep.
And really, like to some degree, a pastor has a responsibility, kind of like present their life like it's all together, but. If there's secret stuff going on, it's going to find you out. And then it just tarnishes people's image of Christianity.
It does. Because then they're like, well, if you were this perfect example and even you struggle, then I can never. I'm not.
If you couldn't make it, I
can't. Then I can't.
Yeah, so that's really sad. But
you can't put your faith in people. That's just, you can't. And it's very easy to. And you can look up to people and you can, I really respect the way they do this or do that. But the truth of the matter is you can't really ever fully rely on someone else. And you can't fully go, I want to be just like them. Because guess what? They're a sinner too. We should be saying, I want to look just like Jesus.
Exactly.
That's the only person we should want to be like.
Example to follow, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So there are some good, some bad, some just very realistic examples that people can look up to in America, because media is just everywhere. That's becoming true throughout the whole world too. I've not met a kid in the past 5 years that didn't have a smartphone and internet connection, so they're seeing it all too. But being able to see themselves in that life, I think a lot of Americans just relate to that more. So that one can kind of be a plus and a minus at the same time. But I think, I look at these bookshelves in my office and think one thing we've got going for us here is just a vast, you were talking about resources, but also just theological resources and education. We've got so much access to biblical knowledge and training and education that is unique in the world. There are plenty of seminaries and Bible colleges and ministry training centers and stuff around the world, but they're not as accessible. There's not as many of them. The number of and quality of the teachers, just it's unique.
They don't have those
unique
resources.
here.
They don't have that training, and we have a lot of people who do.
So we have that. We also just have opportunities to partner together. Churches, because we have freedom, because we have resources, financial, transportation, otherwise, to partner together in ministry and to learn things from each other. I'm seeing more and more ministries taking advantage of that and working together instead of kind of working in competition. So
against each other.
I'm inspired by that. But also realizing we've got a lot of money in the United States.
A lot.
Now, I think it's dramatically and tragically underutilized for mission work.
Yes.
But we've got it. And I think it's one of the reasons that God has blessed this country. Because we've got so much potential for reaching all of the nations and people groups who don't have the gospel. And so we can, do that more and more and more. So here's your plug to give, internationalcommission.org/give. You can help us continue doing this work. But so that is an advantage. As much as money is, the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It can be very dangerous. You can't serve God and money. It is a resource to be managed, to be stewarded, and it has so much power for good. For justice and for kingdom work, and I'm able to do this job. You're able to do this job. I'm able to go with some of our teams overseas. We're able to do that at all. We're able to do the national to national partnerships that don't involve Americans on the ground at all because of resources. Mostly, and not exclusively, but mostly here in the U.S.
That a lot of people don't have overseas.
And so it's inspiring to see people who say, yes, I'll give, I'll help you, I'll partner with you in this way. And really many of our partners, they do go with us too. And they give. So that's a really awesome thing. But my perspective on, like I was saying earlier, driving around in North Texas and just seeing all the wealth and affluence has become more and more positive because sometimes I'm just really judgy when I see someone that just has too much excess. Because that's a conviction of mine, is not to live in excess. But you know what? Some people just really do have a lot. And it's fine.
And that's okay.
for them to have stuff. But man, when they see themselves as a mover and shaker in the kingdom of God, man, that's just an awesome thing. When they see the potential that they have to invest in mission work, and in their church, that's a huge thing, and that's awesome.
Often something so small to them could be so huge to us.
Exactly.
You never know.
It may not hurt them to give $10,000, but to us, that's like
and some people, maybe you can give 100. You don't know how much that means.
And you know what? The Lord will multiply it too.
Exactly.
It's just that is just a huge advantage. I would say, we've got so much more potential than we've even tapped into as Christians in America. So that's one of the reasons we do this podcast really too, is most of the time we talk about work that's going on overseas. And so you can hear and understand what it is that's being done, how much is being done with so little. And this organization is just probably one of the best examples I know even of that. To see multiple millions of people coming to Christ every year. And there's like 15 of us at this office, and then like a couple dozen of other staff.
Like,
how does that happen? How does that happen?
Oh God, it's crazy. It is, but it is. It's awesome to see the Lord work, but He doesn't need a lot. He doesn't need a lot to work.
He can do a lot with a little, and it's just like thinking about how much there
impact,
is. Man, we can
For sure.
We can finish up this task, you guys. We can get a Bible in every language in the world.
Yeah.
We can do this.
Anything's possible.
Let's do it. Cool culture. Let's talk about cool culture. On this segment, we usually tell you fun facts about another country or culture, and usually things that we like. Sometimes places that we've experienced, and what our favorite things about that place are. And guess what? Today we're talking about our home country, and where we both hold our citizenship, the United States of America. And you know what? We do like America.
We do like America. We're proud.
We do. And so,
Americans
but what are aside from the spiritual advantages we talked about, what are just some of your favorite things in general about America?
My favorite things. Well, I'm going to be more specific.
All right.
I'm Texan, born and raised Texan, and I have realized that even just being Texan is so different than being from anywhere else in the United States. So I grew up saying y'all. This has only become a thing more recently for the whole U.S. I grew up saying y'all. All of my northern family thinks that's so funny and so weird that we say that for everything. But it's that, and also it even comes down to the food we eat, the way we talk, the activities we're a part of. I mean, I grew up going to a rodeo each and every year. That was the highlight of my small little city, was we were going to grow up, we were going to dress up and go to the rodeo, and that's just what we were going to do. But yeah, I think it's so funny to see the cultural differences, even from state to state, which people don't think of, but it's so true. I mean, Tex-Mex. Nobody anywhere else really eats Tex-Mex, but to us, it's a huge deal.
Oh, it's a staple.
It's a staple.
Ask me. Yeah.
Tex-Mex and queso and Frito pie. I'm like, oh my gosh, all those things are staples. But I think it is really cool. And you do have to realize there is culture in the United States. I think it's very easy to go, we don't have culture. Like, we don't do
I hear
anything.
that a lot.
Like, we're so boring. But I'm like, the more I've gotten to know people outside of Texas, which I don't know many, but the more I've gotten, I'm like, there is different cultures and there is different things, even within the U.S. But yeah, I think that just finding those things out is so fun. And I'm still finding it out. But America's just so diverse. Like, even if we're all Americans, there's so much diversity in culture and in stereotypes and even, like, just scenery. Like, Texas is so different from, say, Oregon, like, or California. Like, it's just very different where you go. But I think that's probably the most cool thing about America.
It is. I was going to mention the diversity as well, just because of wherever you go, like, it has its own flavor.
Yes.
And even subcultures within that. Like, let's take New York City as an example. Like, all the different boroughs have their own thing, and some of them, you know, there's more of a national culture. Yep. You know, you've got Little Italy and Chinatown and stuff, and just wherever you go, there's
different segments and different people and different.
And I just think that's cool.
It is cool.
That's a cool thing that we have.
There's little quirks about people from wherever you're from, and I think that's really cool. It may seem like
part of it is because it's so big.
Yeah.
But part of it's just because it's a melting pot.
Yeah. There's just lots of different people from everywhere. But I think it's very easy to go, oh, we don't have culture. But it's like, you have to dig a little bit more for it. But it's there. Like, we are different where we're from. So it is really cool to see.
One of my favorite things is the prevalence of consistent indoor plumbing and electricity.
Yes.
And clean water.
I take that for granted all the time until I'm traveling internationally, and I'm like, oh, like, it's just not, it is not common in any other country, even in Europe.
In little pockets it is, but not, when you say common, I guess you mean just
AC. Yeah, and I'm like, you'd think they would. Like, they're nice, their culture's really nice, it's very developed, but like, there's certain things that just are not common. Air conditioning and plumbing are two big things that I'm
even a lot of times, like in Europe, the plumbing is not the same as here.
It's crazy.
Well, and so one of the reasons the buildings are so much older.
Yes.
And it's kind of hard to redo the plumbing. But yeah, the reality is, hey, if you grew up with bathrooms inside in the house, that's pretty unique.
Yeah.
It's strange how things that are just a given that we expect
wouldn't think it's a unique thing,
are unique in the world, but it really is.
It really is, because almost anywhere else you go, that's not normal. But to us, America's just so big, and we've just grown up here, we're like, it's just part of everyday life. It's like, no, it's not really a normal thing. Not at all.
In your own house, maybe in more than one place, you can take a shower. and you can control the temperature of it, and you don't even think about it.
No, you're just like, and then you get upset, like, oh, the hot water's out. Oh. That's me all the time.
Is
Such a big but small inconvenience.
Yep.
And we take it for granted.
Such a luxury, and we have no idea.
It is. No.
I complain. So I do actually. I am very cognizant of the privilege of having clean water in my house and having a bathroom and all that stuff. But air conditioning, I'm pretty spoiled about. I do complain when the AC's not working or when it's hot or cold, like by a couple degrees. And it's not because I'm conditioned to that. It's just like, I don't know. I've taken it for granted. I'm comfortable with it. And it's kind of like when I am overseas, I expect not to have it. And when I'm home, I'm like, it should be working. I pay this money for it to work.
I deserve it because I paid for it. It's like,
so I'm kind of a brat about that. But I do, every time I turn on the tap, I think about, man, this is amazing that we have clean water in my house and it's always here. Mm-hmm. And I, usually don't have rolling blackouts with power and stuff. Listen, if you work in real estate development or construction in North Texas, I need you to hear something. Stop building so many houses when we don't have a power grid that sustains them.
No. Stop with the apartment complexes. Stop with the houses. Let there just be a blank piece of land.
Leave some land too. That's right.
Guys, what happened to ranches?
Right. So, that's another thing we do have. We have land. We have all kinds of different kind of terrain.
Yeah.
And
I grew up around a lot of livestock. A lot of people don't. They're like, you see cows and horses every day? And I'm like, yeah, that's just kind of what we are. For a lot of people, that's not normal. So that's a different, I guess, kind of thing about growing up here. But yeah. And
you have the option. I mean, really, to some point. I mean, it's not like anyone has the economic capability to just pick it up and start their life over something. No. But people do that in America all the time. And that's why so many people move to the United States from other places is I get to decide what my life is going to be. I mean, not 100%. I mean, things happen, blah, blah.
But you can do pretty good. Yeah,
you can. You can come here and you can
live how you want.
Yeah. You basically, you are not assigned to a certain rung of life or career based on your caste in the United States. Nope. Now, to some degree,
yes.
I mean,
that's a whole other thing.
how urban poverty works and all of those that's what we're talking about. We mean, I was born in this family. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Yes. No questions asked. It's not like that here. You can at least try to go do something else.
How you want to live and what you want to do.
Yeah, and that's so unique, and people come here for that, and that gives us an advantage to interact with those people.
Yep.
And gosh, a lot of times they're way smarter than me. A lot of the Indian and Persian students that I know from UNT, they're here for master's degrees and PhDs and stuff. They're way smarter than I.
I know, me too. I'm like, oh.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, please listen to me talk about Jesus. And so, I mean, there's a lot of entertainment, a lot of food, a lot of world foods here. Just opportunity in general. We can kind of leave it at that, I guess. Just opportunities to experience all kinds of different things.
Yep.
And so I probably really got to wrap up, but I did want to point out that one of the good things about American culture is, even though we're very individual thinkers, very individualistic, a lot of people, you leave your job, leave your private office, get in your private car, go into your garage, close it, and never talk to your neighbors.
Yep.
Okay, now that whole thing really, really bothers me because I'm much more of a social, much more of a communal person.
Yeah.
But, and so I think we depend a little too much on ourselves.
I think so.
But people also are very generous and very kind across the board.
That's true.
And so I love following stories where, I heard one recently from Virginia. And actually, this is the high school that my wife went to.
Oh, cool.
James Madison High School
Shout
in
out.
Virginia. And there was these students who they had met a maintenance man from Ghana, and he just was kind of a self-made man, immigrated here and was working. And his dream was, they just asked him, what's your dream? Like, if you could buy anything, what would you want? and he said he wants a Jeep Wrangler. So these teenage boys got together and fundraised and bought him
No
a
way.
Jeep Wrangler. And so it's stuff like that that does happen.
That does
all
happen
the time.
all the time. And
And-
even I've seen with like hurricane relief, or if someone goes through a
Yes, that's a
loss,
good
like
example,
people are
too.
so quick to rally and go, "I'm here for you. I want to
Mhm.
give." People are
Yep,
generous.
they're
I think
here.
that's easy to overlook, the selfishness, but
It
it is
is.
there.
There's so much
It is
selfishness
there.
around. You look at, but there is so much more generosity
There
going
is.
on.
Yeah,
And people do care about others' well-being.
they do. Yep.
And so
I
that's a
love
bright
that.
spot.
Aw.
And they have an opportunity to do something about it.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not
Yes.
saying people in every place are not caring,
No.
but even people who are struggling here in the U.S., like I have a tight budget,
yes.
but I do have more money than I need when it really
Mhm.
comes down to it.
So
I've
I
got
can
to
help
dip
people.
into, something that's meant for,
Something
something else.
else.
But I could help someone.
Yep.
And many of us are in that same position,
Mhm.
even if we're not very wealthy. And
No.
people will do that. People will make some
Yep.
sacrifices, small or big, to help or just
someone else.
celebrate someone else. And that's a huge
That
thing.
is
I
a
love
sweet
it.
thing.
That's a
I
great
love
thing about
that.
America.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. I didn't even think about that. Good
Well, if
point.
you're one of those generous types,
You can also give.
internationalcommission.org/give. And also, if you want to dig deep and go with us to experience some of these things in other parts of the world, and I don't know, maybe you need a better appreciation for your home
Yeah.
country and to understand some of these perspectives
Hopefully
we're talking
this
about.
taught you something.
Come with us. Go to that same website, click go, see our trip schedule. Please come with us to
Yes.
share the gospel. That's all the time we've got. That's more than the time we've got, but I hope you've enjoyed this conversation and have enjoyed having Grace on here again.
Yes, thank you.
We're just going to continue doing what we do, trusting the Lord and equipping and enabling everyone until
Yep.
everybody's had a chance to hear the name of Jesus. Come back and see us next time,
Bye.
or listen to us next time, whatever.